UL as well, and I will be giving a presentation today on the basics of the CARD Act.
And I should, by the way, 2L means the second year law. Sorry. I have to explain that after the first one. After a while, I was like, wait a minute, I should probably say, what does that mean, right?
Well, how many of you all have a credit card or have had a credit card in the past? That's pretty much all of us for the most part, and that's pretty common. About 35% of people between the ages of 18 and 35 have a credit card, and 65% of people in the U.S. between the ages of 35 and 55 have a credit card. So that's a lot of people, is what it comes down to. And the credit card was put in place to protect consumers, so everyday people like me and you, from excessive penalty fees and from credit card companies that were kind of trying to take advantage of consumers. When you signed those big, long credit card agreements that you got, we've already talked a lot about how they like to hide provisions in there. And the CARD Act just is out there to ensure that consumers are on a level playing field. So, have any of you noticed that your credit card statements in the past few years have been a little bit easier to read? Yes, you're nodding your head. Well, they should look more like, they should include information like this. They should include late payment warnings, how long it's going to take you to pay off your balance, if you're making only your minimum payment. For instance, I was really surprised when I looked at this. This person has a balance of $3,000 and her minimum payment is only $90 a month. Well, if you look down at the bottom of the screen, if she makes only her minimum payment every month and doesn't put anything else on her balance, so she's not charging anything else on her credit card, it's going to take her 11 years. And it's going to cost $4,745. Now, that's $1,745 more than what she owed on her original balance. Now, I can think of a lot of things that I would like to do with that kind of money. I could, go on a fun trip or buy a new dress, go out to eat, all of the above, pay some other bills. Well, if you notice that if she pays only $13 more a month, so that's $10 more than her minimum payment, it's only going to take her 3 years to pay it off, and she's going to save $1,033. So I personally would like to have that information when I'm deciding how much I want to pay every month. So to understand the CARD Act, I'm going to talk about it in terms of 5 big questions. Those are what, when, who, why, and how. So first off, what? What is the CARD Act? What does it actually do? Well, the CARD Act stands for the Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure Act. That's really just a big long name. If you want to find out any information on it, you can pretty much just Google the CARD Act. It's easier to remember, and you'll find out all of this information. And as I talked about, it's new rules aimed to protect consumers from credit card issuers' predatory practices. So when? Did any of you all know that in 2009 there was a new law put into place? You did. You're very informed. I had no idea. I noticed that my statements looked a little bit easier to read, but I had no idea that there was this new law that was supposed to protect me. So in May 2009, President Obama signed this law into effect, and most of its provisions took effect in 2010. So they're all in place now, and just keep in mind that it's a relatively new law. So there's still discussions going on and ways to modify it. It's not perfect. There's still a lot of areas where credit card issuers are able to exploit consumers. So they're still trying to work out some of those kinks. Who is in charge of administering the CARD Act? Well, my colleague Hunter talked about this morning, the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and we'll be having a presentation in a little bit from another of my colleagues on some of the basics. But you kind of just want to know who's in charge in case you have a problem with your credit card company. It's always best to talk to your credit card company first. They're able to resolve a lot of the problems without you having to file a complaint and involve a government agency.
And this is great, and thank you, Brittany. Right away, I just want to again point out this website, and we're going to talk about it more this afternoon. But when you are looking at, I know it drives me batty, right? You go into, and if you Google CARD Act or whatever it might be, and you might pull up a lot of bad companies, and it might get hijacked through, seriously, if you pay a fee to Google, then, companies are, there's different things that can come up. This website is really user-friendly and legitimate. And when you see .gov, by the way, that's a good sign, right? And this is probably one of the best ones that the federal government has for just providing basic information about the CARD Act, about their great frequently asked questions areas and things like that, and sort of how-tos and know your rights and things to look for and ways to file complaints and even on product safety and everything else. And I just really want to highlight that website again. I think it's probably one of the better ones around and easy to use.
Also, I talked a little bit earlier about how those credit card agreements are really hard to understand, and they use a whole language in and of themselves. At least I think it's a whole different language than what I speak. But they actually have a glossary on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website, and it's really easy, and they just have some key terms broken down, easy to understand language. It's not like one of those glossaries where you're going to have to go and look up every other word that they use in their definition, which I think it's not very helpful for me. But we talked about the complaint process. If you can't resolve the issue with your credit card company and they're just being really unhelpful, you can file a complaint on the CFPB's website. And as you'll see at the top, it's a pretty easy to use. They have a search engine, but you can also click on submit a complaint, and it'll bring you to the screen. And you can click on credit card, which is over on the left here, and it will bring you to the screen. You pretty much just describe what happened to you, what remedy you're seeking, your contact information, and
one thing that's kind of cool, if you mind going back to that last screen really quickly, you can actually complain about the complaint process.
Yeah.
And they're looking for that sort of feedback to keep improving the complaint process. But that's just, they're really trying to sort of beef out the complaint process itself. So tell your story, that link there, you can actually complain about the complaint process.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I was actually really surprised. A lot of these websites, I feel like their search engines are really bad. They bring you to every press release ever given from an agency. And they, like, the first few links are all like, what do you need to know? What are the laws? Like, broken down so you can understand them. It's not going to bring you to the statute where you're going to have to finagle your way through. So why do we have the CARD Act? I already talked about this a little bit when I showed you the credit card statement. It's pretty much just to put you on an even playing field with the credit card companies. President Obama said fairness and transparency. They want you to know what you're getting into, and they want you to be able to react to that information and not be taken advantage of. So how does this actually work? How does it accomplish those goals? I'm going to talk about 6 main ways today. 1 through interest rate, fees, billing and payment changes, and increased clarity, gift cards, and an ability to pay provision. So first off, interest rates. So bear with me, I know they're complex and they're not very interesting, but they're really important, especially if you're choosing a new credit card, to understand what the new laws are. And so first off, your credit card company can't increase your interest rate for the first 12 months, but there are lots of exceptions to a lot of these rules. For instance, if your interest rate is tied to an index and that index increases, your interest rate can increase. If you have an introductory rate, after the first 6 months, it can revert back to the go-to rate. Also, if you're more than 60 days late in paying a bill, they can raise your interest rate, or if you're in some sort of workout agreement. Also now, under the CARD Act, anytime your credit card company wants to increase your APR, they have to explain why they're doing it. And anytime they increase it, they have to reevaluate that increase every 6 months to determine if it's appropriate. They also cannot increase your rates on a current balance unless you miss 2 consecutive payments. So that means that if they do decide to change your interest rate, anything that's already on your balance is still covered under that old interest rate. It's not you're not going to have this new higher interest rate applied to those purchases. Now, this is especially valuable because they have to tell you 45 days in advance anytime they want to increase your interest rate. So that gives you the option of canceling your card, deciding to switch to another one if you would like to pursue that. So fees, they can no longer charge you excessive penalty fees. So if So essentially what reasonable means is they can't charge you more than $25 if they're going to impose a penalty fee on you. Again, there are some exceptions if one of your last 6 payments was late or if it's justified based on the cost that your credit card company would otherwise incur. Also, no inactivity fees. When I first got my credit card when I was 18 and going to college, this wasn't in place, and I was really surprised that I went to my bank and got my first credit card there, and they told me that it was better to spend money every month in order to save money so that I didn't get these inactivity fees. I don't know, it really surprised me that that was the case, but no longer you can't be charged inactivity fees for not using your credit card. Also, there's a 1 fee limit, so essentially means they can't charge you 2 fees if you violate your credit card agreement in some way, such as by
over limit and late fee.
Yeah. And also, over limit fees. I don't know if a lot of you have noticed that most over limit fees have actually gone away for the most part. They're not specifically banned by the Card Act, but now you have to specifically opt in to be able to go over your credit limit. And so a lot of credit card companies have just done away with that in general.
So they can't charge you a late fee, which puts you over limit, and then charge you an over limit fee. It's just greed.
Unless you opt in to allow for it. Unless you opt in.
I don't even have one.
But when she limit is down over next time, what is that duration?
That's per statement.
But also, it's like with respect to that act, the
Yeah.
violation. Like, let's say you violated it in a couple of different ways, or you have a couple different, then you can be charged with different fees for different things. It's just the same exact thing.
Yeah.
You can't say, oh, we're going to charge you 2 fees for that exact action. You don't make sense. Correct. And you guys should, and one thing to notice is sort of, gee, how is it possible no activity fees, but then prepaid cards, because those prepaid cards are under the Card Act. So that's explaining, sort of putting 2 and 2 together if you're kind of wondering, wait a minute, well, we have different rules here.
And also, because over limit fees aren't banned, I wouldn't recommend opting in to the over limit fee at all. I mean, it might mean that your credit card gets denied, but overall, it's really not that bad. Like, it's so much better for your financial health to just not opt in, your credit card gets denied, and you're like, oh, I must be over my limit, and you go back home and you replan it.
A little embarrassment at the cashier is better than
a lifetime.
Yeah.
Billing and payment changes. I don't know if any of you all remember that your credit card company used to be able to send out your statement and have payment required within 14 days. And that's a pretty quick turnaround. Now, under the Card Act, it's 21 days. So it's a little bit longer. They have to send you your statement, and your statement has to, your balance, or your minimum payment on your balance is due at the same time every month. So they can't change that around, and that just helps, like, you plan your budget, and then you know your credit card statement is going to be due and come out.
Does that mean that you can't, like, plan on paying your credit card bill on the first of the month every month because you only have 21 days? You have to pay it within a few days of getting the bill?
No.
No.
You have 21 days.
What they mean is they've got to give you notice in advance of changing your due date. 21 days in advance of that. Which
Okay.
thing were you? Well, because see, what used to happen, what they're trying to stop is this. They would change, like, let's say your due date was always the 2nd of the month, and then you set up your online payments, or you set up things so that you always just expected that you were going to pay your bill by that time. Well, companies, what had happened and why they actually wanted a new rule where you get notice in advance of any time change is that they were, like, changing that, so you were being charged these late fees, and you thought, well, gosh, how did that happen? It's because they'd actually changed the due date. So now you need to know that in advance, so that you go in, and you make sure that you're paying things on time, and that you have not had things set up such that you'll always be paying on that other date. So it's about notice of any change, so that you know to change your payment schedule. Does that help?
All right, and then payments are directed to your highest interest balance first. That's actually really helpful because in the past they would direct it towards your lowest interest, obviously, and then you would just end up owing more and more because you still have these high interest charges on your account. And there is an exception if you're in a deferred interest plan, payment plan, but As a general rule, they have to direct it towards your highest interest balance first. Also, new to cycle billing, essentially they can't, a credit card company can't impose interest charges on a balance in the current statement. So again, it's just saying that they can't bill you twice, essentially. Clarity.
It sounds crazy, but they were, where they would basically be charging you interest on the same balance twice. Yeah, but we didn't really notice it as consumers, and so now that's not allowed anymore.
Clarity, your statements, we've already discussed this a little bit. They're just a little easier to read in general. They have late payment warnings, minimum payment warnings. Also, just an interesting statistic, the CFPB did a study and they found that 60% of people said their credit card bills are now easier to read after the CARD Act, even if they didn't know that the CARD Act had taken place. So, and gift cards. So the gift cards that I'm going to talk about, they aren't prepaid cards. And my colleague John spoke a little bit about the difference earlier. And just to reiterate, prepaid cards aren't covered by the CARD Act, so that's how they get away with charging you those high fees and just all sorts of bad things. But it does cover store gift cards. Now these would be like a gift card you buy for like a friend for their birthday to go shopping at the Gap. Now, if you go shopping, I know around the holidays, I often saw, deals that I got emailed, if you spend $100, you get a $25 gift card. Those $25 that they're giving you, the CARD Act considers free money, and these rules that we're going to be talking about don't cover those. So just to keep in mind, it does cover gift cards with a Discover, Visa, MasterCard, or American Express logo. New rules, there's limits on expiration dates. So if you purchase a gift card, it can't expire within 5 years of its purchase, the money on it. Also, if you put more money on a gift card, that has to have a 5-year expiration date as well.
And the thing with, because this gets real confusing on gift cards with Discover, Visa, MasterCard, or American Express, because it just seems like, well, isn't that the same as the prepaid? No, because the prepaid cards we were talking about earlier, those are reloadable. Gift cards aren't. Gift card, it is what it is. You give it away, it's a gift, and once it's gone, and it is a gift card.
Yeah. Also, replacement cards. If your gift card does have a balance on it and it's going to expire, you can usually call the gift card issuer and they will issue a new gift card for no charge most of the time. Also, they're required to disclose any fees. I don't know about any of you, when I was probably 12 years old, my grandma really liked to send American Express gift cards. And she sent me one, and I took it to Best Buy after I, saved some extra money to buy whatever it was, a boombox or something really cool. And I got there, and I got to the register, and I found out that I had pretty much no money on my gift card that said it was worth $20. Well, it turned out that I had all of these fees for not using it, and I had no more money. So no blue box. But now gift cards are required on their packaging or on the gift card itself to disclose any fees that you're going to be subject to. Also, there are limits on fees, so they can impose a fee if you don't use it after a month, which it's not as great as we would maybe like, but it does help a little bit, so you have that extra time.
In general, I mean, that's a great point. So really, what we always say is if you do get a gift card or something like that, spend it right away. Use it or lose it. I mean, it is a good idea to do that also because you might have heard in the news, like when Sharper Image went under, is that, if the company goes bankrupt, that's a huge bummer. The whole gift card to a bankrupt company. So, it just makes good sense to go ahead and use it.
Also, so this is the last point on how it works, so we're almost to the end. But ability to pay. I don't know if any of you are stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads, but if you maybe notice that it's harder to get a credit card than it used to be. And that's because you used to be able to use your household income to calculate whether you were eligible for a credit card, and now it's all based off of individual income. So if you are a stay-at-home parent, you can't necessarily get a credit card anymore because you don't necessarily have that individual income to rely on.
Unless you have a co-signer with your spouse or whatever it is, but it is something to be aware of.
Correct, and that also applies to those under the age of 21. So for those of you with kids, this was in reaction to the fact that a lot of credit card companies were going out there and preying on college students who, you'd get to college your first day and almost pretty much like at the admissions fair, they would say, sign up for a credit card and get this free shirt. Well, now because there is this ability to pay provision. If you're under the age of 21, you're required to have a co-signer or show that you have the individual ability to pay. Caution. So there are lots of areas that the CARD Act doesn't cover. And still some problems. One of them we've already spoken a little bit about, the ability to pay provision, and if you don't have an individual income, how much harder it can be to get a credit card. Your issuer can still change your interest rate in response to delinquent payments, which we spoke about a little bit as well. Also, a lot of credit card companies have increased the amount that your minimum payment is actually due. And this is in response to the fact that they can't really charge these excessive penalty fees anymore. So credit card companies have tried to wiggle around the rules a little bit. There's also still some confusion surrounding credit card statements, particularly with the age of electronic communications and the fact that most people get their credit card statements online. They can be a little bit confusing to understand. The CARD Act does not cover credit cards used primarily for a business or commercial purpose. It's for everyday consumers like me and you, and not for big businesses. And product comparisons. If you're out there and you're choosing a credit card, there are so many available that it's overwhelming. And the CFPB is working on a means for comparing the products out there and figuring out what's right for you. But due to the nature of credit cards and people's individual spending habits, it's really, really hard to compare the products. So it's not out there yet. There's not really a good means of telling you which one's the best credit card. But if you know your own spending habits and you look at these credit card agreements and look at their interest rates, that's a pretty good base for calculating. Also, I've included some resources. The CFPB's website, if you're interested in credit cards at all and what the rules are, it's really user-friendly. Federal Reserve also has a pretty user-friendly website. And you can check out our blogs and fact sheets on myconsumertips.info. There's some stuff up there on gift cards. I also recently lost my wallet, so if any of you all have ever gone through that experience.
Oh,
yeah.
fun it was.
It's a load of fun. But yeah, any questions?
Is there a appointed director now of the CFPB? The Republicans
Yes.
are blocking them.
Richard Cordray, yeah, he is the appointed director. That's a whole legal morass, and that he's being challenged because there were those intercession appointments. But between us, as far as like from what I know, like from my friends and different things like that, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I mean, right now we really only have one federal court that even held that about the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board director. And it's probably not going to have a whole lot of repercussions to you and me, most likely. Because right now, he's still the director. Richard Cordray is in place, and things are on their way and going right now. So, but that's an interesting issue, a fun question to ask. Yes, okay.
One of the suggestions we make at our office is for people to go through their wallets and take out every single card, lay it on the top of a copy machine, copy it, flip them over and copy the back sides. Because if your wallet or purse is ever stolen, you get all the information, all the phone numbers, all the account numbers, all the contact information right there somewhere stored at home. So it'd make it easier to contact all those card holders.
And there are a couple of credit card tips in general, just to add. First of all, like on the myconsumertips.info, a lot of the consumer tips have to do with this. There are different, pretty legitimate ways to do comparisons on credit cards. You know, are you the type of person that's going to carry a balance or not? Do you want certain rewards? Do you want travel rewards? Do you want to avoid annual fees? These are all things to look at. Moreover, they can talk about this with building credit. You know, if you have a long history with a credit card company, that's going to help you build credit not canceling that card. Being careful not to apply for too many credit cards because that impacts your score. Being careful on all of those different things makes sense. Also, if you do belong to a bank or credit union, you should really find out what different cards they offer. And that can oftentimes be your best bet because if you have a account there, then you probably can get a credit card without any fees and things like that. And there are a lot of ways then you have an accountable individual there. And if you do ever get your purse stolen or whatever happens, it's nice because then you have someone to deal with, and you can even. I know when my purse was stolen recently and the credit cards were all gone, because I worked directly with people at the credit union, I was able to get new credit cards within like an hour. Have all of mine canceled, get brand new plastic, and be off and go to the store and have new fraud alerts put onto my credit card. So that, for example, and this is smart for anybody to put fraud alerts. Like if you find out, then they will tell you and block things from like a foreign location and places that you would never go to, or really large amounts. You can set up a fraud alert so that you will be alerted right away if some huge payment or somebody buys something really expensive, on your credit card. So these are different ways that you can actually use credit cards to your advantage and actually sort of benefit in the long run, and different ways you can get rewards and things along those lines. So it's not all bad. There are ways that you can really use credit cards to your advantage. And nowadays, in order to rent a car, in order to take a flight, there are a lot of things where you kind of have to have a credit card, and so it's something to, it's got its cons, but it also has its pros.
And if your credit card is stolen, it's great advice to keep copies. I do at home. I did while I was traveling in the airport, actually. So I was luckily past security, but it was stolen while I was in the airport, and actually in DIA. And you can usually call your credit card company as soon as you realize it's stolen, though. You should call, because that just helps catch them. It limits your liability. You're only liable usually for up to $50 on your credit card. There are different rules for debit cards. But your credit card company will work with you if you don't have your number with you. For instance, I don't know my number. I know the last 4 digits. But they're really good about working with you usually.
And we're going to talk more about with the identity theft later this afternoon with our last group of presenters, because there are so many things like that of having a track of things and where you can be preventative now and have this in a drawer and give to your, whatever, but knowing these things, because it actually is kind of, I'm a law professor, and here I think, I'm being so careful and da-da-da-da-da, and I should have kept track of this and that, and I really shouldn't have carried my, licenses to practice law in my purse. There are things that I had in my purse that I probably shouldn't have had there, so then when I had a theft happen to me, and I learned a lot of things along the way, health cards, your, health insurance, everything else. And Ariel is going to talk to us more about that this afternoon, but it makes you think about, it doesn't take that long, but boy, oh boy, can you protect yourself now by having that information on the ready. Thank you. We did